1762. Cock Lane, London, England. The ghost that knocked for justice. It began with a sound, a soft, deliberate knock echoing through the narrow halls of a modest home on Cock Lane, just outside the shadow of St. Paul's Cathedral. At first, the family dismissed it. Houses creak, pipes groan. But this was different. The sound wasn't random. It responded. One knock for yes, two for no. And then it spoke, not in words, but through a system of answers that became increasingly complex. The entity claimed to be Fanny Lines, a young woman who had recently died under strange circumstances. Her ghost, according to the knocks, had returned with a message. She hadn't died of illness. She had been murdered. Whispers spread like fire through London's icy January streets. The house on Cock Lane, once unremarkable, became the center of nightly vigils and seances. Spectators came in droves: clergy, noblemen, scholars, laborers, all curious to hear what the ghost had to say. The raps continued, always from the walls, sometimes under the bed, other times seemingly inside the room. The spirit was most active around Elizabeth Parsons, a young girl who lived in the house. She would tremble, speak softly, and claim to feel the presence. The ghost said her husband, William Kent, had poisoned her. He was to blame, and the ghost wouldn't rest until justice was served. Crowds gathered nightly. Coaches lined the muddy street. Clergymen attempted to interrogate the spirit. Even prominent author Samuel Johnson visited, describing the room as filled with dread. The ghost answered questions through its knocking. It revealed personal details only Fanny would have known. And always, it pointed to Kent. But Kent was a known man, educated, respected. He had lost his wife, and yes, she had died in the very same house, but of smallpox, not murder. Still, the pressure mounted. The ghost's accusations were growing louder, both literally and figuratively. A formal investigation was launched. Elizabeth was separated from her family. She was moved to a different room. That night, there were no knocks, no answers, no ghost. But when she returned to her own bed, the ghost resumed its accusations. The investigators became suspicious. Was Elizabeth the source? One evening, hidden observers watched closely. Beneath Elizabeth's bedsheets, they discovered a small wooden board, flat and perfect for creating hollow thuds.
She had been making the noises. But was she acting alone? It was revealed that her father, Richard Parsons, had been manipulating the child, guiding her to answer questions in a way that cast suspicion on Kent. The motive? Revenge and money. Kent and Parsons had clashed over a loan, and Parsons saw an opportunity for gain. He used the girl, the recent death, and London's thirst for the supernatural to his advantage. The entire haunting had been fabricated. The ghost never existed. When the truth came out, the public was outraged. The courts charged Richard Parsons with conspiracy and fraud. Elizabeth, though still a child, was reprimanded and placed under supervision. Kent, once accused of murder by a ghost, was exonerated. The court called it a cruel and calculated hoax. But the story didn't end there. Even after the exposure, some claimed they still heard the knocks, late at night, in that same room. Witnesses said they felt cold bursts of air. Objects moved. One man swore he saw a woman in white standing at the foot of the bed, her face hollow, her mouth moving without sound. People wondered, if the original ghost was a hoax, then what was this? It was then that researchers began digging deeper into the history of Cock Lane. Long before the Parsons family lived there, the property had belonged to a physician. He treated patients in secret, many of whom died inside its walls during an outbreak of the plague. In his journal, recovered decades later, he wrote of hearing voices at night, of seeing patients who had already died. He called the house heavy with their souls. There was even record of a previous tenant before Parsons, an elderly woman who swore her bed moved on its own and that voices whispered to her from the chimney. She died in her sleep. Her family claimed her face was twisted in fear. Fanny Lines was buried only a few blocks away. Her grave, modest and quiet, became a place of pilgrimage. Some said the knocking wasn't fake. Some believed the original story had been exploited, but the spirit behind it was real. That maybe, just maybe, the hoax had awakened something older, something that had always been there, waiting to speak. In time, the street was rebuilt, the house torn down. A tavern rose in its place, but patrons still whispered of strange noises in the cellar, of shadows moving past empty hallways, of hearing knocks from behind the walls. The Cock Lane ghost had gone quiet, but not gone. It left behind a story that blurred the line between the living and the dead, between truth and deception. A story where a fabricated ghost stirred up the real thing, and where, even when the trick was exposed, something stayed behind, something that still wanted to be heard. Because sometimes, pretending to summon a spirit is the very thing that brings it forth. And once it's awake, it doesn't go back to sleep.